Jeff Berman, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you, Guy?
I'm great. Welcome to another edition of Clienting Live, local legal marketing conversations with the great people at Attorney Sync.
The great people. Always wonderful to talk to you. Pick your brain a little bit.
Yes, what are we picking about today? I've got things to talk about. Unless you've got
Okay.
things, what do you want to talk about?
Let me start with a call that I had. I want to give you a little bit of rundown for some context, and then open it up so you can riff a little bit for me and tell me how you might approach the issue.
Let's riff.
All right. So here's the setup. We've got this veteran PI firm, and they're splitting up. Okay. So the founding partner is retiring, but he's keeping the original entity and the original domain alive because in his state, he needs to do that in order to collect referral fees and business for some mass tort stuff that he's got going on. The remaining partners are going to launch a brand new entity from the same office and with the same phone number. So here's kind of the mess, right, that exists. The new partners are going to own about 700 plus pages of indexed web content that came from the site, but they're going to have to do that in a new domain. There's no 301 redirects or anything that's going to be in place for that. And the main point of survival, so to speak, this bridge is going to be this Google business profile that has about 350 reviews and a 4.9 star rating that have been built up over 7 years. And they sort of want to ship of Theseus that profile, right, to change the name and the owner, but keep the address, the phone, and all these reviews that are coming over, right? So that's kind of the situation that's described. They're coming saying, man, like what should we do? What should we be fighting for and prioritize here? You know, how can we approach this? Understanding that we're probably going to take a dive for a little while while we try to do all this. So that's the scene setting. Want you to absorb that and kind of give me your take on what you think.
Well, let's start with there's what wasn't clear. You mentioned that it's a PI firm that serves the veteran community.
No, sorry. It's a PI firm that handles all kinds of I don't say run of the mill type of PI
Okay,
work.
you said
So
veteran
MVAs.
PI, so you meant that it's just a long-standing PI brand.
My apologies. Yeah.
That's all
So
right.
it's
It's
just
all
a
good.
long-standing PI firm. That's all.
So is the firm branded as the partners' names? Do they have a trade name?
It's branded as the partner's name, and that is what
The
he's
main
taking
partner,
with
the
us.
retiring partner's name.
Correct. Correct.
So
So
there, so
so
this
even
is
if you were going to keep everything, there'd have to be a
mhm.
rebrand involved. But
Yeah,
in
this is a
this case,
rebrand.
you're not only you not only have the rebrand, but you're losing any kind of like equity to be able to pass through.
Yeah. So let's call it what it is. It's a brand new law firm. So this is a new brand. You said that they get to keep the pages of content. They just have to migrate it to a new domain. I would be
Correct.
like,
Would you
I'd
do
even look to
that? Would
see,
would you keep
yeah, I
that
would even look to
content?
see what's salvageable there. I don't even know what
Yeah.
might be salvageable there. Um, if you're not, you mentioned there's no redirects, so you're not
You're
going
not
to
going
be
to
able
be able to
to
redirect
capture
because
that.
the
Yeah.
partner's taking the domain.
Yeah, but he's taking the content down, so all that those 700 pages are coming off of his site. He's just going to have like a brochure site for referrals.
That's correct.
Yeah, so you can audit the content on the existing site and see if any of it's worth even moving over. But I would just treat this as a brand new. This is a new law firm, new brand, Google Business Profile. So are they fighting about the Google Business Profile?
Fighting's probably too strong in the context. Let's assume for this purpose that the partner that's leaving is like, yes, you can retain the Google Business Profile.
Okay.
Is there a way that you'd approach that? Is it? I know that Google's particularly dicey about the PI profiles. Is there just like a tactical way you'd approach that so as not
Yeah,
to try to blow it up?
I would treat that as a rebrand, right? So this is our firm. If it's agreed that it's this firm's Google Business Profile, you can just start over, rename the Google Business Profile. I'd be prepared with your verification docs in case you get tripped up in a re-verification situation. But it's not doing any unless the retiring partner is intending to keep it. for some reason, like if he wants it as part of like reputation stuff, if they're not fighting about it, then for sure they should go after that, and they should just rebrand it. And then they should go out and do all of the any other profiles around the web that are need a rebrand.
Right.
I would go rebrand all those profiles too.
Is there there's always risk when you're switching, but is there
Right.
do you think that there's like a lower risk in this sticking, or is this something that's pretty risky? And like if you're in front of this firm and you're consulting them in terms of like
You
you're
have, what
keeping
do you
the
have to
address, keeping the
lose?
phone, names changing, owners changing,
Yeah. What
is
do you
that a
have?
risky move per se?
Well, risky from what standpoint? From Google's standpoint? I mean, what do you have to lose?
That's fair. It's less about like, because you're right. Like if you didn't do it, you lose it altogether.
Yeah.
If you were trying to give a consult with regards to like the probability that this sticks, that you're going to be able to keep this domain with the Google Business Profile with the reviews.
Yeah,
Do
I
you
think
have
there's a decent
experience in terms of
chance.
seeing that stick or not?
Yeah, I think there's a good chance you can keep that. Again,
Okay.
if it's not a practitioner listing, right? If it's a practitioner listing, it's the lawyer. It's a
Yeah, it's
practitioner
not.
listing.
It's the firm
Yeah,
listing. It's the
I think
firm
the
listing.
practitioner listing would be trickier. I think firm listing, you're like, we're doing a rebrand. You got your maybe it triggers a some kind of suspension or something that you got to get re-verification through. But I think that is fair game. I think the other thing, the question is like, do the reviews read like a mix of reviews of different people at the firm, or is it all this lawyer? Like, does it feel like a one-person shop from a Google Business Profile standpoint? I don't know that it matters that
No,
much, but
yeah,
yeah,
it's more mixed because it was a firm that was the branding was tied to the individual, but the firm had grown beyond just, a solo kind of operation for a while.
yeah. I think there's a good chance that sticks, that they keep that.
Okay. And then you'd said from the content standpoint, you'd like audit that versus like just trying to slap it all up on the new site.
Yeah, I mean, look, most law firm websites that I look at have way more content than has any value. Whether it was because the site's been around a long time and they were sold the 6 blog posts a week package for the last
Mhm.
20 years, or a variety of other reasons why there's a bunch of content. I would look at this is painstaking, but page by page basis of whether we even want to migrate this over. Look, if there's stuff on there that's actually has value, if they've done original research, if there's content that actually has some meaningful value, and I would, that's the other thing too, that I just kind of people that are listening, like, how do you do this? I would take each page and kind of run it through that self-assessment that Google provides for the helpful content
Mhm.
auditing, and see how it plays. And I think there's ways that you could use AI to expedite some of this, right? Like you could probably create a custom GPT or a custom gem in Gemini to give you some directional sense of like what's on the site. Obviously, you could crawl it with Screaming Frog, and Screaming Frog has some tools that you could use to assess it. But ultimately, it's like, should this page even come over? Why are we bringing it over? Some people make arguments for like, internal linking, internal link structure, and things like that. And like the size of the site does matter. I think uh, with a lot of big asterisks and caveats, like bigger sites tend to do better than like if you just start a one-page site. But I can show
Yeah.
you some examples of the opposite of that. But my hunch, anyway, that was a very long-winded way of saying my guess is that there's a lot of pages that aren't even worth bringing over.
I would agree with that. Would you mentioned kind of eat and checking out the pages. Would you use Google Search Console and analytics to assess from kind of from that standpoint?
100%. Yeah. So
Yeah.
so that's a great point. If they have access to Search Console data and analytics data, I'd run it through the one, are these pages even getting, I mean, step one would be like, are they even getting indexed? Step
Mhm.
two is, what is their impression to position to click ratios? Like, are they just sitting there generating impressions, but no one's clicking on them? Are they generating any impressions at all? Then using analytics data, are they generating any organic traffic at all? Are they generating any traffic period for anything?
Yeah.
Because sometimes you'll see referral traffic for internal links and things like that. But usually what we see is there's a bunch of pages that maybe they're indexed at best, and they're running impressions up, but they're deep in search results. They're not generating any clicks. The content's out of date. They haven't generated a single visit from organic in several years, if ever. Like that's not doing you any good, really.
Yeah. 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 So that was an interesting one. What else? I feel like you had something we were talking about beforehand here you were going to bring up.
I don't know. I was kind of just going through some of the topics that been top of mind for me. I was a guest on Answering Legal's Everything Except the Law podcast,
Mhm.
and one of the things came up is this. We talk about attribution and quantitative and qualitative attribution data all the time.
Right.
Short version is like, in my view, best practice as part of your intake process, as part of your web forms, and as part of all of your client journeys, is having conversations with potential clients about how they found you. And one of the points that Nick made on that show, and I encourage people to go listen to the whole show. He gave a bunch of examples in the context of answering calls for Answering Legal, but someone will say something, or the web form will pick up something, the analytics data will pick up something, and then after, when you actually see in the context of the conversation, it's a totally different source for that potential client or that lead. And I just think that that's so valuable, is to incorporate your intake data when you're thinking about marketing strategy, when you're thinking about
Yeah.
messaging, when you're thinking about media resource deployment. Like this is that layer of quote unquote attribution that most agencies don't get to. Like most are reporting on like click journeys, but they're not actually taking consideration that intake data that they have, and CRM data, to inform where they're deploying resources, how much money they're spending, cost per acquisition by various channels, what touch points are most prominent along certain client journey paths. And so I think that's an extremely valuable conversation for firms to be having with their marketing people.
So give me an example. I know you were, even if it's a hypothetical, but you were talking about finding some interesting things. And I know one of the things we talked about before this was you were saying, well, how useful is that? Because they all just say Google or the internet, right? But talk through a little bit about what gets uncovered when you're really digging into like a transcript in that conversation.
Yeah, so I guess the most obvious one is in the referral context, right? So like maybe in the web form, or when you initially ask, they say something like Google, and then you get to talking to about it, and then they're like, oh no, my brother actually met you guys at this local community event, and then I was using Google to search on your name and to find what other clients had to say about you. And so even though I said Google at the start, but now that I think about it, I was referred by a family member who met you at the local event.
Mm-hmm.
That's an easy example, and that's not picked up anywhere unless you're using that conversational intake data to inform your marketing resources. So people will, and we see this all the time, right? Like the digital marketers will say like, show me the attribution, and then people will say, well, we can't do any attribution for our TV or our brand building campaigns. And so the digital marketers will be like, redeploy those resources in digital because we can track everything. And then all of a sudden the performance marketing, all the digital marketing doesn't perform as well. And it's because the brand's been turned off. And so I just think that we see this story over and over and over again. Anyway, I thought that was a good conversation on that podcast. We'll give a shout to the Everything Except the Law podcast. Go check that out. Another one that's been kind of top of mind, we've talked about it a lot, is this AI rank tracking stuff. I put it in our most recent company LinkedIn newsletter. So if you're not subscribed to Clienting on LinkedIn, go check that out. Reference some of Rand Fishkin's work and research at SparkToro and AlertMouse.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit. I know you referenced it in the article that you posted, but it's super interesting and maybe a little counterintuitive.
Yeah, I mean, the short version is that marketers are looking for ways to validate that their efforts, the work that they're doing on behalf of clients, or in-house marketers trying to justify it to the C-suite, that, hey, look, we can track your rankings in ChatGPT or AIOs or Gemini or whatever it may be. And again, there's all sorts of issues with it. Rand did some research, but my takeaway is that there's just so much variability in these results that rank tracking really isn't very effective at all.
And variability in the prompts, right? It's not just a keyword.
Well, again, he was holding the prompt static. He was saying for the same prompt, there's just so much and David Mim
Which isn't
chimed
even
in.
a real world application. That's not how nobody's using the same prompt over and
I
over.
know, but again, I'm giving the rank trackers the benefit of the doubt that people are actually using the tool like that, which they're not, which we
Right,
know they're
right,
not.
right.
But yeah, and in fairness, that's not entirely true, right? We're in this transition period where people still do use Google in the traditional search context. And so even though I think we're going to see increasing variability, we're in this period of like, we're living between search and conversational, and people still query Google with, bottom of the funnel non-brand queries. Um, anyway, point being is that there's just so much variability that it's very difficult. In fact, potentially impossible. You can go look at the study and look at the numbers, but it's very unlikely that it's returning the same responses over and over again. And then even more so, they had Near Media guys had Rand on their podcast in their memo. It's even more of an issue when you're talking about business, a competitive landscape where you have hundreds of businesses packed tightly in a geographic area, because the variability is even more. Whereas, like, I think Rand used the example of like 9 Volvo dealerships in LA,
Mhm.
and he's like, visibility wise, the top there, you could index like the top 3 on like showing up. They're not always going to show up in the same order, but they're there somewhere on the page. They're there somewhere in the response. But you do that in an environment like personal injury in Los Angeles, where there's hundreds of law firms. And David Mim was talking about that from his observations. We see the same thing, that it's so variable, like rank tracking. It's just not realistic. And then you couple that, because there's always trade-offs. You have to think about the investment that you're going to make to actually get a statistically significant number of, manufactured queries to be like, hey, what percentage of the time are we showing up for these prompts? And like cost benefit, like it's high cost and it's not really giving you a ton in a benefit, in my view. So anyway, and of course everybody's selling on this stuff, right? Because that's the way that they try to trying to be empathetic. They're looking for metrics. It's very difficult to do attribution, especially if you're not doing qualitative and asking questions. You're not hearing Chat GPT, or you're not doing like the Near Media folks, where they do user behavior studies, where they're actually watching people interact with the different surfaces, and listening to what they say is important to them as they're doing that. I think that's one of the huge values of the Near Media program, is like you're seeing actual respondents to these types of user behavior tests talk about like what they recognize in the results,
Yeah.
and what's important to them, and what language resonates in them, and then why they're making their choices. Like that's super, super powerful in terms of informing your own messaging and how you position yourself in your market.
So the issue, or your issue, is more around the rank tracking and the way it's being sold as this FOMO, as opposed to, I mean, obviously you want to be able to do things to position yourself for this inevitable future of it being much more intertwined in the search and everything that we're doing. But the problem is that the measurements of it and the way that it's being sold by these agencies is just, I don't know if I'd say not truthful, but not very accurate in terms of being able to measure it back to what's actually happening, or the outcomes that you actually need of signed cases.
Yeah, it goes back to the same idea of like, it's kind of like garbage data. Like we live in this world where when someone says it's data, we're like, oh, that's like the science. It's got a scientific label on it. It's trustworthy. It's reliable. And a lot of this stuff isn't as scientific as they'd have you believe. And so, again, showing up in a tool's rank tracking thing, is that really
Right.
going to, is that really a directional indicator that you should, is that a leading indicator for more business? And I
Right.
think, a lot of times it's not. And remember too, this is their thing too, like to keep perspective, because like you have limited resources, and how much are you going to deploy on this AI rank tracking stuff? The techniques, the tactics, all the things that they're trying to sell you, then the tracking of it, it's going to be a significant cost. And it's like, aren't those dollars better deployed in other ways for the firm, especially if you're a firm that's over indexed on this stuff already and you're not diversified? Like, to me, it's just too much risk to have so much of your marketing investment in this technology that is evolving all the time. I mean, again, like six
Yeah.
months from now, all this money that you spent on trying to track your rankings from 6 months ago, like, really?
The irony too is that the diversified approach is what actually benefits this more than the
Right.
short-term gamification of these rank tracking. I think that's what gets lost a lot. Is like
What do
the
you
way
mean,
to do
Jeff?
it is
What do
actually
you
to be
mean?
doing. Yeah. Say it
Tell
again.
us what you mean.
I mean, ultimately, what needs to be happening is they are trying to serve up in ways that you're being mentioned across all these different marketing channels, right? So it's not just about going all in on like an SEO component, right? It's about you're showing up in local community stuff, you're showing up in social, you're getting talked about in a lot of different ways, you're having good client experiences. It's truly the what's old is new again, type of approach with this.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing is like we're in this world of I mean, it's funny. It's the I always keep saying this, but it's like we're at a time of the most transformative technology in the history of humankind, and also the biggest hype cycle of the same technology.
It's
Like
true.
it can be both. It can be the most revolutionary, remarkable technology, and also the most overhyped. And again, it's like the same thing as always. Like we see the same thing historically with SEO. There's a knowledge gap there. People are exploiting the knowledge gap. Um, Buyer beware.
Yeah. And it moves fast, right? And so there's a real, at least from the sales side of things, you could really play on the fear of if I don't do this now, I'm
Sur-
toast, right?
Survive the future.
Yeah. But that can also lead to rash decisions or investments that are, not necessarily the things that are going to pay off.
Right, that's the
So
thing. You're just investing in the wrong stuff. I mean,
right,
that's the
exactly.
problem. And another just kind of like taking it a step further. Another recent thing. There's this conversation in Ryan McKean's Best Era. Not just Ryan McKean's. There's a whole team at Best Era, but lawyers talking about like essentially the gist is like is the agency model totally done? Combination of like AI, combination of contractors, and like can I hire a bunch of contractors who are using AI to essentially replace my agency? And here's my thing: like if you can do that, great. Um, it's not as easy as you think. And by the way, all of these agencies are thinking the same way too. And so,
Yeah.
for me, again, when it's the same thing we still tell lawyers, like if you're rushing to commoditize your expertise, don't be surprised when you're replaced by technology. Like that's what the bots can do.
Yeah.
Um, and so for me though, like I look at, some of the things that were listed in the auditing a website, page speed insights, lighthouse audits. Like, yeah, technology and freelancers can do a lot of that kind of stuff. Putting it together an omni-channel, multimodal, multimedia marketing plan that's trying to achieve different objectives and shifting cost per clients from non-brand direct response to brand and reducing the cost per acquisition of clients over time. Like, show me,
Yeah. Right.
show
It's
me
not
that
there
you're
yet.
doing that.
It's not
I'd
there
love to
yet. In
see it.
fact, one of the things I keep running into is this issue with not having a quarterback, a strategic layer, like making sure that these different channels are all cooperating and talking to each other and that things aren't siloed. And one of the things that grabs me about what you just mentioned is either you're going to be the one that's doing that if you're managing a whole bunch of contractors and AI, or you're going to need to have someone that's in charge of making sure left hand's talking to the right.
No, exactly right. And that's not limited to AI, right? That's any combination,
Right.
whether it's agencies, whether we see even in-house marketing teams that are
Mhm.
siloed, right? Like the SEO person isn't talking to the brand person, isn't talking to the social person, and you can see it in the results. And so that's why we're so doubling down on this integrated approach where the person that's leading our accounts needs to be helping law firms navigate how all this stuff is working together with
Yep.
dashboards and data infrastructure that actually can make meaning out of all of these different activities. There's a lot of just siloed, whether it's in-house, agency, freelancers, and that leads that I would just say this: at best, it limits the effectiveness of those media dollars because you're not taking advantage of that cumulative, omni-channel, persistent brand effect.
Absolutely. And the learning that can be happening in one channel that can form what you're doing in another. Otherwise, you're
Yeah.
paying to get that learning in each channel by itself.
Totally.
Yeah.
Nope.
Good points.
Yeah. Another, and the other kind of thing, is kind of we're coming to the end here. I posted about this, but as you know, I went on this family cruise and we're going through the Fort Lauderdale airport, and there's a PI firm that's advertising for snowbird injury law, and the call to action is like free case review. And again, like, this is just one of those examples where, like, take that offline media dollar, and instead of only appealing to people who are like looking for free case reviews, make it consistent messaging, offer, and I wrote this on LinkedIn, so you can go check out if you want to see more details on it, but provide some kind of like snowbird discount package or snowbird value pack or snowbird safety tips or snowbird something.
Yeah.
That, hey, actually a lot more snowbirds would actually like scan that QR code or go to that URL, download a thing, opt into an email message, or at the very least click something that allows you to retarget them. That's the kind of stuff. Like, show me how AI is doing that.
Right.
It's not.
Yeah. It's not. Not yet.
Maybe tomorrow it will.
Maybe tomorrow. All right.
Well, I think that's
Good
it for
stuff this week.
this edition of Clienting Live. I will, thanks for the conversation. If you followed along or you're watching this independently, we do record these. And we don't record them, but we also publish them live Tuesdays at 1 p.m. We'd love to hear from you joining the conversation. If you've got questions or topic suggestions, or you want to participate, we are looking to have people join us for these conversations to answer local legal marketing questions.
Let us know. Let us know. All right. Good talking with you, Guy.
Take care, Jeff.
Bye.